Christopher Jessup, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
We are going to listen to Svítání. It's Czech for dawn. Can you give us a little taste of what we can expect to hear and what you envisioned for the piece and what inspired it?
It's basically an orchestral tone poem about the symbolic power of daybreak. It begins with a quiet, suspenseful dialogue between winds and piano, capturing the stillness and uncertainty of night. Gradually, the music builds toward a radiant climax that evokes the first light of morning breaking through darkness. And at its core, it's really about resilience and renewal, a reminder that even the longest night gives way to dawn. It's basically a meditation on hope and on the promise that light always returns.
You're often inspired by imagery and poetry. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and your process?
Yeah, I do get a lot of inspiration from poetry, philosophy, and astronomy. I'm really interested in how music can reflect inner experiences and how sound can express things that words can't.
Do you hear a sound when you imagine it in your head that sparks a particular motif or instrument?
I do. Not necessarily a particular instrument, but I'm very inspired by the natural world. I also get a lot of inspiration from Walt Whitman's poetry. I've set his texts a number of times, and one thing I really love about him is his connection with nature. That really resonates with me. For me, composing is really about storytelling through texture and color. I really love finding the point where lyricism meets modernity, where something feels both timeless and fresh. It's very transparent, the orchestration, and my orchestra writing tends to be that way. I would compare it to, like Copeland.
How do you take an image like the stars or something and turn that into a musical image?
I always start at the piano. And I think that my piano playing really influences my composing and vice versa. The foundation I had in piano gave me a wealth of information and knowledge that really informed my composing. I like to sketch at the piano, improvise like I learned how to play. Then I, take, motifs and turn them into larger phrases and build a piece out from there. Orchestrally from the beginning, imagining how light, movement, and space can unfold across an ensemble. I'm really fascinated by contrasts, shadow and radiance, tension and release. I try to build music that moves through those emotional spaces with honesty.
Do you sketch out a story?
Sometimes. Sometimes I like to just kind of go with the flow and just write from start to finish. Sometimes I feel that that's more cathartic in a way. Yeah.
take you to do this piece start to finish?
I think it took me a few months. I've had it played by a few different orchestras, so I've refined it here and there. That's part of composing, is the piece is never really done, which is a wonderful part, but also frustrating.
It's Czech for dawn, right?
Yes.
Why Czech?
It's a good question. I just find it to be a beautiful word, and it was first played by a Czech orchestra, the Brno Contemporary Orchestra in Czech Republic. They premiered it and also released it on an album.
Wow.
This is
That is quite a piece.
Thank you.
What do you feel when you listen to it?
I really love that recording. It's by the London Symphony Orchestra. So they're obviously one of the best orchestras in the world, and they played it so well. I'm really lucky to have that recording.
When the violins finally fill out, it was like this happy moment, right? But it was like a bittersweet happy. It wasn't too bright and sunny. It was like we went through a lot to get here kind of feeling.
That's exactly what I was going for. So yeah.
Yeah, and then eventually the sun overtakes it, but the dark side is still in the background there.
Yeah.
It's waiting for its turn again.
Yeah. It comes back to the single keyboard stroke at the end.
It ended the same way it began, only in reverse.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it's kind of a full circle piece. Kind of like the cyclical nature of sun rising.
Very cool piece.
Thank you.
What age were you first introduced to the piano?
I was always, when I was a little kid, when I would go to hotels or things like that, if there was a piano in the lobby, I would immediately start playing it. So that was around, 7 or 8 years old. And then my parents got me formal lessons, and it was just meant to be.
Did you grow up in a musical household?
Not a musical household. I do have music in my family. I have an uncle who's a jazz musician, and my great grandfather was a clarinetist. So I do have music in my blood.
So you're little 5 years old, 6 years old, and you come across a piano. How do you know what to play on it?
Well, I was always listening to a lot of music when I was younger, especially jazz music. My parents would play it in the car, and I would imitate what I heard. My favorite song to play was "Take the A Train" by Duke Ellington. That was the first piece I taught myself how to play.
That's fascinating. So you could just hear it in your head and find it on the piano.
Yeah.
Amazing. What kind of jazz were you listening to other than Duke Ellington?
Ella Fitzgerald was also a favorite of mine. Yeah.
Anybody else?
Well, anything Cole Porter, uh, anything that he wrote, and of course, Ella does a lot of his songs. So, yeah.
Gershwin?
Oh yeah, I played Gershwin as well. So
It's so funny that you said all this. I was hearing all this jazz influence in it.
oh really?
It was reminding me a lot of like 30s, 40s musical film music,
Mm,
like, from the Red Shoes or something like that.
yeah, I love that era. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Like I was saying, it reminded me of those old film scores or, An American in Paris.
so
Yeah, that kind of thing. Obviously more dramatic, but
yeah,
yeah, I could hear that background in your music. So
Mhm.
so yeah, I thought it was very unique for that, and it never got pushed the tonality to an uncomfortable, whereas. I think a lot of composers these days just
right,
maybe they've made an artistic point, but in my personal opinion, they make it rather unpleasant to listen to along the way.
yeah.
But yours was always pleasant to hear the tension
Thank
within
you,
it.
thank you.
When did you start composing, by the way? What age?
Well, first I started playing piano. I started playing piano by ear, and I improvised a lot. And that was kind of the beginning of my composing, improvising. And then later on, I learned how to, write my music down. Um, but initially, just started playing by ear, the piano.
Wow. How long did you play by ear?
For a few years, actually, I didn't learn how to notate my compositions for quite some time.
How did you find going into Juilliard, especially with such a jazz influence on your background? Were they welcoming of these differences, or was it kind of hard to fit in the box?
It was, I initially wanted to go for piano, and I ended up going for composition, which actually ended up being the best thing for me. Um, the piano is it comes from a very traditional classical place. But with composition, there's a little bit more creative freedom, I think. Yeah, my last year and a half of Juilliard was basically completely online, and then my graduation was virtual too. Um, so that was weird.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Not a grand finale, exactly. Was
yeah,
it?
yeah.
Did you find you became more prolific writing during the time?
Actually, I did. I think that I was aside from this past year, I think that time was the most productive I've been compositionally. Um, yeah, I did. I wrote Svítání during that time.
I was wondering actually when I was listening to it because it seemed to resonate with things will get better, right?
Yes, exactly.
Who is your most influential teacher, or your two most influentials?
Well, I had two wonderful teachers at Juilliard. My composition teacher was Melinda Wagner, and I actually still work with her. She's a really phenomenal mentor and music composer. So working with her was been amazing. And then my piano teacher was Jerome Lowenthal, who's like a legendary pianist.
Yeah.
And he was fantastic as well. I went to a number of festivals with him over the summer. So they were both really, really formative mentors to me.
For both of them, what's one or two invaluable tips or concepts that they gave you that you still use?
I think just to amp up my confidence in my own instincts as a musician. I think, I had all the right instincts before, but they just gave me more confidence in them. And when you have that confidence, it really sets you free creatively because you're not, judging every note that you put on the page or every note that you play. It just flows naturally.
Yeah. Trusting yourself is.
Yeah, I think trusting myself is something that I learned from both of them.
Do you find it different when you're playing your own compositions versus another composer's?
Yeah. I don't necessarily even like to play my own pieces. I kind of actually prefer to see it through another person's eyes.
Yeah. There's this great debate, especially for the classical historical composers. There's the rigid school where you do it like it's on the page and you do it like the time period it was written in, and then there's the more liberal school of, well, we can be flexible with it and do it in new ways. What's your opinion on that as a composer? Do you want your works to stay kind of how you've heard them in your head, or in hundreds of years would you like them to be transformed in a way?
I think it's always interesting when a piece sort of takes on a life of its own. Like you've created it, you've put it out in the world, and now it's always interesting to see the life that it takes on. So I think that pieces that transform over time are more interesting to me.
As far as modern day music, what do you, when you're not in work mode, you're just chilling out, what do you listen to?
I love pop music. I love Lady Gaga. I think she's great. I grew up listening to Britney Spears, so I love her.
Too.
Yeah. I really love 80s music. I love 80s and 90s music. I love Janet Jackson, Taylor Dane. Yeah. So I it's funny because I, wasn't even alive when that music came out, but I love it. It's great.
Yeah, no, it is great.
Yeah.
It has a certain ambiance that time period.
Yeah, absolutely. Great songs. Yeah.
How do you think your music and classical music at large, how do you think it fits into today's world and speed and pace?
Yeah. I think that a lot of really important conversations are happening that are changing that, so that classical music has a place in our society this day and age.
Yeah. I feel like there's a bit of a change coming in music. The artists are starting to have a lot more contrast between them. And
yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah.
I'm a little worried.
Yeah.
Because my generation, we, whether you want it to be or not, we all had a common platform everyone was watching. So if you had cable, you were exposed to all of these different things on cable, whether you want it to be or not. We all have seen, for instance, The Sound of Music, because it's always on during the holidays on cable, right?
Right.
But I'm noticing with the younger generation, there's no common artistic stream. And unless the algorithm is feeding it to them on YouTube or whatever they're watching these days, they haven't seen it. I can't tell you how many even teenagers that I've talked to who haven't even heard of The Sound of Music.
That's
or
right, yeah.
Whatever, doesn't have to be. The Sound of Music's pretty well known. There should be pretty well known. Yeah. And it's really making people very isolated and insulated from things beyond what they what they're already listening and watching.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And, when YouTube came out when I was in college, I believe, and I was so excited because I had suddenly like this access to historical recordings that I might not have even been able to get. And if I could get it, I'd have to order it from some obscure town in Europe and, find someone to translate the email and somehow send the money and then wait 3 months for it to ship to get some CD or even a tape, whatever kind of medium that this obscure recording was on. And now I can just click a button.
Yeah.
And for free, I can listen to this.
Yeah.
And I thought it was so cool. And I learned so much about classical music from my access to YouTube. And again, this is before like the algorithms started telling you what to watch. This is when you got to decide what to watch, right?
Yeah.
and I find that everyone's got YouTube now, and they're not being exposed outside of whatever they're already watching. You know, if you're listening to Janet Jackson, you know, you might get exposed to Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
Right? But it's not going to be like, but you know, you might also like this Rock 3 performance.
Yeah. It recommends, it recommends similar things to what you.
Yeah. It's only similar things. Like,
Yeah.
there's not even an outlier to just like expand your horizon by listening to Frank Sinatra or.
Yeah. That's a really interesting perspective. I can.
Yeah,
that.
I'm very worried about it because, this is the music that is why I became a musician. Sounds like it's the reason why you became a musician.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Music from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And it's not even in people's ear anymore at all.
Yeah, I
no, they've never heard it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I feel very fortunate to have been exposed to that music. I like older music.
Yes.
I've always liked older music. Yeah.
Yeah. And older music is so organic too, because there wasn't all this, auto tune, and now we got AI composing and much more contrast between things for it because it wasn't so compressed into one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe the ground will break on that. I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you think as a composer about AI?
I think it's a really amazing tool. I think, like a lot of things, like it can be used for good and it can be used for bad. So I think that people just have to use it wisely and in moderation. It's not really helpful for creativity.
Yeah, it's not. That's so sometimes too, even like when you hit a wall on something and you're like, oh, I don't know what to do here. I don't know how to make it work. If you just ask AI to do it,
yeah,
you're going to come up with a creative new way of doing it. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
But do you worry at all about being replaced?
A little bit. It's pretty amazing what it's able to do. But again, I don't think that it can really replicate human creativity. It can try, but there's just something lacking in AI generating music that human produced music we just can't replicate.
Yeah. You can imitate a human, but it just doesn't. There's no soul.
Yeah.
In it, is there?
Yeah. The soul is, and that's what art is all about. So I really hope that doesn't get, tarnished.
Yeah. I agree. I hope we're right. Do you like fashion?
I do. I love fashion. Yeah.
Is Fendi your favorite?
It's one of my favorites. Yes.
Who are your favorites?
Well, this is actually Fendi, and it's a combination of Fendi and Versace. It's called Fendace. Yeah.
Fendace. Aha.
Yes. Yeah.
For the man who doesn't want to choose.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I love Balmain, Dolce & Gabbana. I really like to incorporate fashion in my art.
In what ways do you do that?
When I perform, I used to wear more traditional concert attire, but I'm trying to experiment a little bit more with that. I think there are a lot of artists these days that do that, and I think that it works really well, and it makes them more interesting.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. What do you wear these days?
Well, for my Carnegie Hall performance, I'm going to be wearing a Dolce & Gabbana outfit.
Liberace style?
Yeah, sort of.
Yes. Love this. Now I'm definitely coming.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I think the female performers have really stood out the past maybe 20 years because the women have been given this liberty. We can wear whatever, we can wear a sparkly dress, or we have our hair and everything. Whereas the male performers, they're just coming out in their black suits. And it's kind of visually hard to compete with female performers in that respect these days. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, why shouldn't guys be able to do it too?
It was really nice chatting with you this afternoon.
Me too.
If people want to follow you and keep up on your work, and where can they find you online?
Well, I have my website, christopherjessup.com. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook.
I'll put that in the description of the video. And where can people stream your recordings?
I have my music on Spotify, YouTube, on all major streaming platforms. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'll put that in the description as well.
Yeah.
Well, it was really lovely to have you and to talk about all these topics and listen to your beautiful work. I wish you all the best.
Thank
I
you.
can't wait to hopefully meet you in person on the 15th.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much.